Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Stohn, Chancellor of Trent University in Peterborough and Durham, and also a proud Trent alumnus. Last week on Trent Talks, our experts discussed learning at home during a pandemic. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by faculty that teach at Trent University's Durham campus, Dr. Marina Morgenshtern and Dr. Dalon Taylor, who will be discussing at-home dynamics and how we can continue to get along while being together in close quarters each day during the pandemic. And I should note that at the end of the program, we'll be providing links to resources that are available to you. And Dr. Morgenstern is an assistant professor in social work, whose areas of teaching and research include, among other things, family resiliency and coping with family transitions, such as immigration, divorce, remarriage. She's particularly interested in exploring factors that help families get stronger despite different life challenges they may experience. And Professor Taylor is a lecturer in social work, whose areas of teaching include social work with group theory, models and dynamics, social work practice with organizations and communities, advanced indirect social work practice, feminist-informed trauma practice, social welfare, critical social work. She is a very, very, very busy person. Her research focuses on migration and immigration, skilled immigrants, health inequities, race, racism, and social justice. Before we begin our discussion today, we would like to first respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territories of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Marina and Dalon, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we address today's questions from our audience, Marina, I wonder if you could start by giving us a bit of background on the impact individuals and families are experiencing as a result of social and physical distancing.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this exciting talk. Yes, this coronavirus lockdown has been harsh on each one of us. Transitioning from structured daily routine that happened outside of the home to being in the house, inside, all the time is a big challenge. And for very many, a very big stressor. But the challenge and the stress vary from individual to individual, from family to family. So we know that this pandemic actually increased the differences between us in terms of the social positioning we occupy. And what I mean by that is that often gender, class, sexual orientation, disability play a huge role in informing how we deal with stress and how we experience this lockdown. So, for example, we know that COVID-19 is much harder physically on men. We also know that it brings a lot or much more increased household and caregiving burden on women. Canadian research is telling us that the potential or the risk for family domestic violence is increased too. And it's not only in Canada. The numbers from all over the world are not great. We know in France, it went up 30%. In Australia, we are experiencing or witnessing 75% more reports recorded than previously. In Canada, 1 in 10 women say they are concerned about possibility of domestic violence. We know that LGBT community has been hit disproportionately high in terms of job losses, and that the members of the community feel much more worried about what's going to happen than anybody else. Finally, we know from the US research, we don't have this research in Canada, that African Americans had been hit by the COVID-19 much harder than their counterparts. So, as you can see, everybody experiences it differently. I often hear these days about how we are all in the same boat. And I think, no, we are not in the same boat. We are all in the storming sea that might be similar to us, but our boats are different. And we have, on one end of the continuum, we have luxurious, strong, stable yachts that have a lot of room for everybody to experience gourmet cooking and meditation and yoga and fun with kids. And on the other end of the continuum, we may have flimsy rafts. But so my response is no, we are not in the same boat. But everyone is looking to navigate their boat with respect and empathy and responsibility. And the point here is that we want not just to weather the storm, but to turn it into the opportunity to family growth.
Well, thank you. And Dalon, maybe picking up on what Marina just outlined, could you maybe speak about the diverse range in family challenges that people are facing in self-isolation? I mean, maybe things like small versus large space living, families of essential workers, shared custody situations, roommate challenges, or income-related experiences.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me. This is a great opportunity. And yes, piggybacking on what Marina says, this issue that COVID-19 has brought, the pandemic, it's impacting all of us. There's no one left that is not affected. However, individuals who were already vulnerable prior to the pandemic, their situations are even worse. It's even more dire right now. And so the issues that many families face have become more complex due to the pandemic, due to social distancing, being cooped up, some self-quarantine, even within homes. And for individuals who are working, i.e. Mainly the first responders, the individuals who work in the hospitals, who are dealing with these issues up front, the essential workers, they too are struggling. Working in close confines, the gear, the attire that they were accustomed to, that has changed. Going home, having to deal with family issues, wanting to probably just get a nap, to go back out again to face, deaths in some cases. These are definitely taking a toll on families. For individuals who, once upon a time, there was routine where, they were living in same quarters, but they would not be crossing paths. Maybe one would be going, the other would be coming, or, family members had their routine. That has, for the most part, been brought to a standstill. So you now have people bumping into each other, falling over each other in some cases, where living spaces are quite tight. And that creates a different kind of dynamic. And just going back to what I said initially, some of these issues of family dynamics existed prior to COVID-19, and COVID-19 has made it worse. So if we look at what we should be taking away from this, how do we get out of this? How do we get out of this with that family structure intact, regardless of what your family structure looked like? How do we weather the storm that Marina mentioned that we're all in with this COVID pandemic? How do we weather that effectively and move past this and develop coping mechanisms and skills and technique that will see us for the better when all of this is done? So, for example, talking about precariousness, when we talk about immigrant families, for individuals who perhaps are new to Canada, may have just come here in February, who are dealing with some of these stressors, that creates even more tension in family situations when it comes to financial situation as well as family dynamic. So all of those things combined are areas that are added stressors on families and the dynamic that we're working with.
Well, thank you both of you for that context. Let's move into our audience submitted questions. And the first one is very appropriate given what you were just talking about, Dalon. Maybe I'll go to Marina first, although I should just note, as always, we've received a lot of questions and we've tried to combine them into the few most asked ones. But here's the first one. As Dalon was just saying, with so much time together in close quarters, arguments and conflicts are going to arise. So how can we indicate to our families or our partners, our children's or roommates, a need for a break or a space apart without hurting their feelings?
Yeah. Well, of course, cabin fever is starting to happen in everybody's quarters. It's been a very long time that we're sitting inside with very little opportunity to get outside. I mentioned before this idea of family resiliency, this idea of how we don't just weather the storm, but grow from it. And I think that when we talk about family resiliency, the very important thing is this mindset that prioritizes our relationship. And so every behavior or every conversation or whatever is happening is driven by the question, okay, how is it going to impact my relationship in the long run? And so when we talk about family resilience, families who thrive have very clear, direct, open, and tolerant communication. And so responses or conversations are direct and clear and clearly indicate what are my needs in a respectful way. So this is where having a breather makes a lot of sense. So before you say something, take a breather, bite your tongue for a second, and think, how is it going to impact this conversation? What do I want to happen? Do I want to be happy or do I want to be right now? And so another thing that's important in resilient families is finding this balance between together time, which is very much important, and me time. And in order to have the energy to the together time, everyone needs the me time, the own time. And so when the request to have time alone is done in a respectful way, it shouldn't be taken or interpreted by others as a betrayal or as a sign of dissatisfaction with their company or anything like that.
Well, that's, I'm going to go to the second question. Maybe Dalon, you could speak to it because it really builds on exactly what Marina was saying, but maybe in a specific kind of way. Many of us have university-age children unexpectedly at home. And just when we were settling into being empty nesters and they were relishing their independence, we have no space to get away from each other, and they aren't always interested in spending time with us. So how can we both emerge unscathed from this experience?
Thank you, Stephen. I don't know that there is such a thing to emerge unscathed. It's more how do we minimize, what happens in those relationships. And yes, you're looking forward to your independence. This is readjusting for both parties or for all involved. Negotiation, having some negotiated space. At that point, coming from university, students are at the age where they can understand that, again, the impact of COVID is like nothing that we've ever seen. So everybody's trying to deal with it on the fly almost. We don't have a handbook to say, turn to page 15 to see what the answer is. So it will require negotiation. Alone time, as Marina said, that is crucial, but also some negotiated time as a family unit finding out what each person is interested in and having some compromise, maybe doing one activity a day to kind of, come together, and then we can go off our separate ways. Having conversations about what about what I like, what would I like to take out of this? How can we build some form of interaction with respect, around respect, and still give each other a space without feeling like somebody is trying to slight the other. It will require patience, a lot of understanding, and a lot of support from each other, because the circumstances, as we found ourselves in, none of us expected this. So we have to really be focused on doing the best that we can to support each other, regardless of the circumstances.
And as a follow-up to that, and maybe I'll stay with you, Dalon, but Marina, please jump in. Mm-hmm. Tips for students returning to this dynamic. So I was talking about us as empty nesters. Now let's look at the point of view of the students. And maybe in particular, students returning to toxic family relationships. That's got to be very difficult. Mm-hmm. And also sibling rivalries. How should parents manage any fights that might break out between siblings who are cooped up at home together?
And talking about returning to toxic relationships, that is really something that require tact. And I don't know if we have enough time to really dig into that. Because what do you say to an individual who then has to deal with that, toxicity that they're faced with? Under the circumstances, there are, and some of the supports will be placed on the screen, at the end of this discussion, that if those apply to your situation, and you can reach out as much as possible. There are support groups on internet. I know Trent also has some of those for students to, a place to get some feedback, some support. The first thing is, can you remove yourselves from those toxic situations? Do you have other family members whom you could be able to stay with for a brief period, knowing that we don't know how long this is going to last? And within the context and the confines of social distancing, how can we do that safely? So you first have to assess how toxic is that situation, because if it is really toxic, then the best suggestion or tip would be to look at alternatives to leave that situation. Then if it's something that can be worked through, again, compromise. How can we compromise? Who will then, be responsible for bringing together and having those tough conversations to talk about the impact, to talk about how I feel when you do so and so, or when you say that it makes me feel this way, and hopefully we can hear each other, or families can hear each other and move to a better place. And again, this whole COVID-19 pandemic is placing us in situations that we've never been in before. So we'll have to be prepared to come up with resolutions and resiliency that will tap into solutions that we haven't considered or approached before, including some of the ones that we've done as well.
Well, and maybe Marina, are there any things like mediation or intervention strategies that could be helpful?
Well, I think just what comes to my mind, something that can be done in the confines of your own home without necessarily looking now for external support, is what I call perspective triangle strategy, which requires one to reflect on the situation or negotiation or conflict from 3 points of view. One is your personal point of view, and this requires a little bit of self-awareness. So why I'm responding the way I'm responding, what needs drive me, what fears drive me, what are my intentions, what is it that I want really. Another point is driven by empathy, trying to understand another person's point of view. So what is it that they need? What is it that may drive their actions or their response? And finally, the third point is the third person perspective. Like, so imagine like your conflict is screened and you're watching it from the outside. What is it that you understand about the situation? How do you get a fresh perspective on it? So this strategy allows you to shift your mindset, to shift your approach to what's happening, and hopefully you can come to the questionable, challenging situation with new lens. And I believe that maybe if each one of us exercised a little bit of such strategy, it will be really helpful to find a way where we meet, because this is what's important, the common perspective.
That's hopeful, yes. And now we're getting to the end of our time. So a final question, which maybe picks up on that. So many people who are maybe watching today or at home have a lot on their plates. There's a lot of expectations on them. They're working from home, learning from home, setting screen time limits, cleaning and cooking with little time for any self-care. So how do we identify what the priorities in the home are? And are there some strategies to help create positive and calm environments when there's so much to do? I know my own personal strategy, which is probably not the best, is retreat. but Dalon, are there some strategies?
As you're speaking, Stephen, this saying comes to mind: "You're stronger than you realize." And I think if families begin to focus on their strengths, take some time, create activities that you're all contributing to as a family, that you can be involved in despite the confined spaces. So try to support each other. And I know some of these things are easier said than done, but relationships are about work and they're about building. It's hard work. You roll up your sleeves, you do the work, and you reap the benefits and the rewards. So I would say, start from the place of support, start from the place of strength, and work through the issues as they arise. Learn to compromise, learn to respect each other. And this too shall pass. At some point we'll look back at COVID-19 and say, boy, this was something, but we got through it on the other side. So if anything, I would say that's the core, that's a basic, the simplest form of let's work towards each other's strength. Let's build each other as family and as people who are coexisting under the same roof, and support each other.
And that leads to a final question, which is, and maybe Marina, I'll go to you first, but what are the positive takeaways and lessons that we can take forward from our time cooped up together during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? This morning I was reading something and I came across a saying from Eckhart, who said, stress is when you're here, but you want to be there. And I think it's so, well, at least to me, it seems so much relevant to what's happening today, right? We all are here, but we so much want to be somewhere else. And it's right. Like, I mean, COVID-19 thwarted so many of our plans and our hopes for 2020. But the positives from this is that, yes, we will tell stories about that one day. And let's try and make sure that these stories are good memories. And by good memories, I mean, let's make sure that this time is spent cultivating relationships within our homes, but also with friends and extended family and other people. And it's about being kind to each other, being kind to them. They did research after 9/11, and they found out that New Yorkers after 9/11 became much more kind and attentive to each other and caring and supportive to each other. It lasted, though, only 6 months. So, how do we, or how long are we going to last? And I hope to last much longer. To do that, however, we need to make sure that we spend some time with ourselves. And this is where exercising, dancing, or having routine are important. And by having routine, I don't mean that every minute of the every day is accounted for something. By having a routine, I mean waking up and thinking about one thing that I want to do today to make my relationship stronger.
Well, and thank you for that. I'm an Eckhart fan as well. I love his saying, wherever you're going, there you are. And another one, which is very appropriate to the times we're in today. And I don't think he was the first to say it, but it's don't just do something, sit there. In other words, give yourself some positive alone time. Dalon, have you got any final, maybe hopeful messages for us?
Yes, and to add to, sitting there, just take some time to yourselves. Take some time to be that, change, that example, that light that you want to be, even in these confined quarters. Reach out to family members. Despite the social distancing, we can still use technology to connect. Inviting people in your spaces through virtual means. And so take some time to do that, to kind of break the monotony of always being together, making sure that you are taking steps that and actions that are mindful of the other, to make sure that you work through this together versus apart. We're stronger together.
Thank you so much to both of you. We're stronger together. What a great final message. Today's topic can be a difficult one for many individuals, couples, and families. In a few moments, we'll provide a link to resources that are available to you if you are interested in further information, but especially if you are in crisis and in need of confidential support. Please remember, you are not alone. Thank you again for your time, and be sure to join us next week as we discuss emotional wellness in uncertain times with Trent University psychology faculty, Dr. Robin Hanley-Defoe, and Trent University Durham professor, Dr. Brenda Smith-Chant. In the meantime, if you have thoughts on today's program or would like to submit questions for next week, you can do so on social media using the Trent Talks hashtag. Goodbye for now, and I hope to see you again soon.